Our presenters today are the dynamic duo of Dan Arena and Danny Foster. Dan Arena was born in Oakland, California during World War II. When his father and uncle returned from the war, they resumed building and racing unlimited hydroplanes in Detroit. Each fall, his family and he would travel to Oakland to the grape harvest, as his grandfather was in the wine business in Oakland, believe it or not. Living in two places each year continued until 1957, when he was in the 8th grade and Lafayette became home year-round. Dan completed high school in Lafayette and went on to graduate from college at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Following the sale of the family business, Arena Craft, pleasure boats, Dan opened a retail store selling and servicing both power and sailboats at Loch Lomond Harbor. He remained there until 2017 when he retired. Dan has continued his hobby of restoring and showing the family recreational boats as well as family race boats. Danny Foster, we have a lot of dams. Danny Foster was born in San Francisco Military Hospital during World War II. His father, Dan Foster, was a pilot flying supplies to China. He received an Air Medal and a Distinguished Flying Cross. After the war, his father continued his boat racing career and relocated to Grosse Pointe Woods near Detroit. He is often referred to as the first superstar for his outstanding record of piloting unlimited hydroplanes. Danny completed high school at Skyline High in Oakland, attended Oakland City College, where he raised all kinds of heck, I understand, and graduated with a business degree. Danny's career started with Lincoln, St. Louis, as a district manager for both automotive and industrial loop systems. He was also Northwestern manager for IR Industrial Pump Division. I'm sorry I didn't get what that is. Danny has followed his dad in racing vintage hydros and restoring boats. The 1930 generation racer stepped hydro that Danny restored and now runs was a Bonfine, formerly owned by Herbert Fleischacker of San Francisco. Please welcome Dan and Danny, and be prepared. Thank you, Gary. We have two microphones here today, because we'll be moving around and trying to demonstrate our dad's and uncle's illustrious career. So we're hoping you will enjoy our presentation, because we are obviously very proud of them. And we have a microphone. It wasn't me. I'm like, you got it, buddy? Duck is it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, here today. We're happy to be with you and give you a snapshot of our dad's and uncle's illustrious career. Dan, this story really is what we like to share with you is a David and Goliath story. And you'll find out as we go on here how these young boys took on the greatest boating event in the world, the Gold Cup, raced in Detroit, Michigan. So from their humble beginnings on Lake Merritt, they became friends.
But first, let me explain something about the dams, because it can get a little confusing. My dad was Danny Foster. I am Danny Foster. Dan Arena's uncle, who we're referring to, is Dan Arena. And this is also his nephew, Dan Arena. So, for the sake of our talk today, I'm Danny Foster, and that's Dan Arena. Okay? Danny and Dan. Okay? There will be a test. So, what can I say? The story begins in the Lake Merritt area of Oakland. I don't know if many of you know how that lake became a hub for boating and people to their sailboats, their power boats, and it became quite a mecca for the Oakland area. And the two guys that we're talking about, young boys, my dad lived near the Golden Gate Theater, and Dan Arena's uncle lived nearby. Not quite sure the address.
What year?
What year? This would be in the early 30s.
Dan was born in 1916, and we lived on Harrison, just up the street from Lake Merritt. Harrison ran right along the east side of Lake Merritt, and so we were just walking distance down to the lake and back. Go ahead, Dan.
All right. So the journey begins in their early days of competing in Lake Merritt with their outboard boats and so on. Dan, I think you have some pictures of some of the Lake Merritt deals. He's my photographer go-to guy here today. And this is a picture of Dan Arena and my dad with the in one of the early boats. But we're going to digress a little bit into the early days of Lake Merritt. And any time.
This is Danny and Danny Foster.
The mic.
Danny Foster. There we go. Okay, thanks, Danny. To go back to what Gary said, yes, I was the firstborn grandchild in the family, and because I was male, I got the family name, which gave me a little bit of a step up in the family hierarchy and stuff like that. And so as I grew up after the war, I was a war baby, I was privy to all of the early years when Dan and Dad got back from the war and started the racing career again. I was involved. I lived it, dreamed it, the Allisons, the Rooster Tails, and so forth like that. And whether it's hereditary or environment, who knows? I had it both, so that was the way that it was going to go. To bring this into what we have here, in 1994, I accompanied my father and my uncle back to Detroit to be inducted in the Unlimited Hall of Fame for unlimited boats at the Gold Cup in 94. There we met Dan Foster and 3 other gentlemen that were all inducted at the same time. It was at that time I realized just what a history that they really had. I grew up with newspaper articles from 1911. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, and pictures that were probably double that amount. And so, in seeing the presentation to all of these gentlemen during that ceremony, and what a beautiful job with not only movies but pictures of each one of these inductees, you really started to get a feel. And on my way back, I started to pay attention a little bit more about the history and collecting all of the photographs. And today you will see some of the pictures that came from that in newspaper articles that brought the 2 close friends together. And I often think about the fact that the story we're about to tell, if that had never happened or worked out the way it did, God only knows what my life would have been like if that had ever happened. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. Okay, like you said, my uncle, 1916, which is now me, I'm Dan Arena. I was raised right next to Lake Merritt, and it was my little brothers and our playground. We spent our whole life down there playing with our little toy boats and running around in bicycles and stuff like that. It was a beautiful park. It was 17 miles in one direction, around 155 acres that was put together. And although in the earlier years when the lake was, well, not the lake, but it was a pond, it was just almost like a slough that came in. And in the 1860, Samuel Merritt, who was the governor, decided to start cleaning up the area and making it a complete circle because Oakland was growing so fast. And on the west side of the tributary or pond was what they called Brooklyn. And he was the one that took that area and, how would you say, annexed it into Oakland, which is now East Oakland. And the lake continued to grow and prosper. In 1920, the lake got pretty polluted, and they drained it, dug it out to 10 feet deep, and filled it up, and sort of, by a series of pumps, made it to where they could stabilize the waterway, and it became a lake, and was named Lake Merritt for all of the work that had been done. So anyway, this picture right here of Lake Merritt is 1913, and this is, the way it was, picnic grounds. It was also a haven for birds. There was a bird sanctuary, and there were sailboats and power boats and rowboats, and they had 4th of July fireworks and stuff like that. So as a young kid, this was just heaven as we walked down the street. By 1927, powerboat racing was allowed to be in the lake, and that's when it really exploded as far as for the boys. The year before, Danny, I had built my first boat at 12 years old, which was a rowboat at the winery during the wood shop that we had at the winery. And me and my brother would take it down to the lake and realize that rowing was not what we wanted. So I went home and stole one of my father's fishing boat engines and put it on, and that was our haven where we would go down and play with. So a year later, when they started racing boats on Merritt, we were like little groupies. My brother and I followed around talking and taking our little boat. And I had mentioned that my father had a winery in Oakland, but if you remember in 1920, what happened? Prohibition. We were now making grape juice, selling grapes in pallets and so forth like that, making some sacramental wines, but and maybe a little bootlegging on the side. But things were tough, and everybody worked in the business, and the business did okay, but it was no longer a winery. And one of the warehouses that Grandpa uses, where I would put my boats and the engines and so forth like that, and as time went on. By 15 years old, this is me on the deck of a boat. That is AJ, the great, pretty popular race boat driver at the time, and he took me under his tutelage and taught me how to drive. And you can see the Red Devil was one of the early boats that I built. I'd buy a junk boat, refurbish it, and put a bigger engine on it, and was able to horse trade over the years. This is me with him teaching how to drive a boat, and learn the ropes of racing on Lake Merritt. By probably around 15 years old, I was pretty much on my own. This is Charlie Horse that I was running outboards. I started in stock and slowly worked my way up to, I guess it was C super stock. And I started to make a name for myself. I started being in the newspapers, and by then we were pretty much acclimated into the history of Lake Merritt. This is a picture of the Hearst Perpetual Trophy there on Lake Merritt in the earlier years, and it was incredible, the crowds that would come out the 4th of July with the fireworks and so forth like that. You can see the Oakland Tribune building there to the back and some of the racing. By 1934, a bunch of these guys decided that they wanted to step it up a little bit more from outboards into inboard boats. And there was 3 very wealthy people that all lived around where we lived in the upper part of Lake Merritt. The first one that came up there was Lou Fagel. His father had the bus company, safety buses, the first school bus buses around the neighborhood, and it had an engine in it that qualified under the Gold Cup class boat. And so he decided that he wanted to take and build some Gold Cup class boats. He ordered several hulls and started trying to talk people into racing against them, because they needed 3 to do it. And in the end of 1934, the group got together. There was Lou Fagel, there was Stan Dollar, the grandson of the Dollar shipping lines, and then there was Edgar Kaiser, the son of Henry Kaiser. They had the money, and they were the ones pushing the class of the boat. They had their first meeting in December of '34 at the Lake Merritt Cafe. There was 21 people. The dues were $5 a year and another $3.50 to get the numbers on the side of your boat. By then, I was out of my money capabilities, and I wanted to get into driving the Gold Cup class boats. So who was the best leverage I had was my grandfather. I had a leg up in the fact that my grandfather, in the early teens, 1912, 1913, was considered the fastest man on roller skates. At the time, he would skate for the Idora Park, which was in Emeryville, and it housed the largest indoor wood roller skating venue in the world. And he was quite as you can see, articles of what he did. In 1913, he skated for the World Championship speed skating, where he came in second. So he was very proud of all of those early years, and it made it easier for me to sit there and hit him up for some extra money and so forth like that. And so that's how it started.
Dan, excuse me, and you notice that was another Dan Arena. I didn't mention that the other day,
Yes.
or today.
Well, being the firstborn, just the family name, and through the luck of the draw, I got it. So here's a picture of these boats that Lou Fagel had contracted for. It was Howard Baxter in the area that built several of the boats. Lou Fagel put in his bus engine, and then my father found a Curtiss Wright, which was a Hispano-Souza World War I engine. They ran around 200 horsepower, and he found it back in Pittsburgh on a dealer run and sent it out to me. And so I sat there and started putting the boat in the engine and stuff like that at Baxter's shop. I got a price breaks because I promised Howard that I would advertise his boat and called it the Howard Baxter Special, and got a little bit of a break. We did pretty good that year of 1935. The club had grown to about 45 members and was starting to get some in. We ran 9 different races around the Bay Area, up and down the coast. And the last race that was in Labor Day, the last race, there was over 50,000 people around Lake Merritt to watch these boats run. So we were really becoming a namesake for the area. I got a little bit tired of being an also-ran. If you notice the trophy here to the side, in 1935 it was Lou Fagel that won the overall trophy for the Doc Barron Trophy here. And so immediately after that race, I had taken this boat, stripped it all down, pulled the engine out, and started to rebuild the whole boat. And then I got a close friend of mine, Lloyd Taylor, who was just an engine marvel, to start building up the engine. And we started to push it from 200 to 300 some odd horsepower. And Lloyd Taylor went on to design and build the Crossley engine, become quite a famous engine builder at the time. But by then, we were all storing our boats at one of the warehouses at the winery. Danny Foster and his midgets, and we had our family, our hot rods and the kids. So it was a big warehouse, and we became just a little boys club of a bunch of teenage guys working on their toys. At the start of 36, when we were testing the boats, we took the new Golden Gate boat out for a run with Wally Snow sitting there. And in testing it on the estuary, a pinhole went in the side of the fuel line, started spewing gas out over the right side of my boat, and the exhaust set it on fire. So I told Wally to jump. I went over the other side, and it was burning, and into the salt water. When I came up, excruciating pain and skin falling off the side of my arm. They rushed me to the naval. Wally Snow and a couple of the friends rushed me to the naval infirmary over there and got me healed up. I ended up being fine. I was in the hospital for quite a while, and I had burns in my arm for the rest of my life. But everything worked fine, and I was ready to go again. But Wally Snow's parents banned him from ever getting in a boat with me again. So I now had no co-pilot. We were all at the winery working on our stuff, and I was putting the boats back together. And another really close friend came up to me and says, "I will ride with you anytime, any place, when you want." And that was Danny Foster.
Thank you. And the story continues. The Golden Gate Winery was their hangout, where their people had stored midgets, boats, and so on. And consequently, Dad became a pretty good mechanic around the midgets, and ended up repairing the two-stroke in this particular case. The midget that he ended up driving had an Alto engine, which was a 4-cylinder two-stroke engine that met the specifications for the particular midget races. Now, they were going up against Offenhauser engines and so on. Right. And this picture was done by my aunt back in the day as an art project, and took my dad's early pictures here into zoom. This is a man that is born to go fast. And this is the humble beginnings of my dad's career in both car racing and boat racing. So at that Golden Gate Winery, after working on the engines, this is one of the little midgets, it was quite popular. And for a first place, he got $100. And that was big money, from that standpoint. So the car was not his, but he was a driver, and the owner of the car actually sponsored him to take the car up and down California at the different raceways. And he had, I hate to say it, but he was known for a bit of a temper. And he got dubbed the wild man behind the wheel.
This is his car right here, as you see it.
Yeah. He managed to survive the races. It's a very dangerous. You notice there's no roll cages, there's no seat belts. This is a death trap, to be honest with you. And they were competitively racing on dirt tracks. One of the events he told me about, it was a big race in Alameda, one of the tracks, and the track was very hard, so they wanted to get extra traction. So they put stove bolts in the drive wheels and screwed them onto the back of the tires. However, it gave them traction, as you can imagine. What they didn't plan on is the spinning of the tires created sparks. So the car, as it went around the tracks, was, can you imagine, like a 4th of July parade? And then the stove bolts started coming out of the tires and landing in the stands. So it was, I think he did win the race, but there was some casualties as a result. I.e. the wild man behind the wheel in midget racing. But because of his engine knowledge and so on, and at the Golden Gate Winery, this opportunity came with Dan Arena to partner up with him on this boat that, as you can see in the boating, there was a riding mechanic and the driver. So it was a team.
Danny Foster.
And Dan Arena. Right, Miss Golden Gate. So there we have a typical race boat of the day. And
As you notice, the name Golden Gate Winery, my father decided to get a little bit of advertising off of the boat for all of the money that he was putting at us, so he did take advantage.
And one story about going back to the midget racing, because these were two-stroke engines, you can imagine the amount of smoke that they would put out. And consequently, sometimes they said in some of these arenas, there was so much smoke you couldn't see the cars. So it meant for a very interesting evening, maybe gas masks at the same time. But Dan, carry on now. We're gonna go from these humble beginnings to how would you take these boats and consider going on these two kids. Now we're talking 19, they're kids, going up against the Gold Cup. So Dan, take it from here. Give them a little background on how that came about.
I want to go back first just to the CSA Boat Club, that we have a bunch of members here. You can see up here at the top, this is my card from 1935, which was the Inboard Motor Boat Association. The following year, because we ended up with a lot of outboards, we no longer wanted to call it inboard. So we came up with the California Speedboat Association. And you can see my card here, 90 years, almost 90 years later, it's still going. You want me to? Yeah.
And give us the prelude to going to the Gold Cup and what took place there.
Okay. What we have here is you can see the numbers on the front that cost us $3.50 to have the numbers put on the side of the boat. In the first year, 1936, by the time the boat was back, and if you can remember what the boat looked like from the Howard, we completely redesigned the boat, or I completely designed the boat and set up a pin up in the front end of the boat to get turning. Because you remember, we were running on some of the races in the on the Oakland estuary, and at one of the races that we did, we were running in 3 feet of water at low tides, and when we ran around the turn, we were throwing mud up on the side of the road for the cars. So, you know, in the early years, you went wherever you could go. We ended up winning most of the racers. The boat just ran beautifully, and we pretty much dominated the field up and down the coast. And in 1936, we went down to LA, Danny and I, and we won what was considered at the time the Gold Cup of the West Coast. You'll see the trophy right here. It was called the Doc Barron Trophy. It was the top trophy that you would win. And we won it in the first year in 1936. And then when we went down for the championship, we won what was called the what was the name of the trophy that we ended up?
Well,
There it is right there. It was Boating Magazine that made this trophy, and the winner of the national championship got it each year. And if you notice right here, I'm ahead of myself. This is the first flag that was used, and Danny and I had won it for the first 2 years, 1936 and 1937. This is a picture of it at the present day. This is a picture of the trophy. And here we are, the first winners for 2 years, and then it went around for years and years.
that was actually a bronze. Very, very nice trophy. Unfortunately, we don't have it, but nevertheless, it is part of our history.
When we won the national or the West Coast Championship in 1936, you ended up with the moniker of 1G on the front of your boat, meaning that you were the #1 boat in the class at the time on West Island. So for all of 1937, we raced with that moniker. Danny, do you want to talk about when we flipped the boat?
Not really.
This
It was wet.
Yeah, it was wet. This is the Lake Merritt in one of the races, and again, it was for one of the trophies like the Doc Barron. And we were pretty much out and ahead, but ended up running into an underwater object. The boat, as it's described here in the article, the boat went up into the air, flipped, and came down upside down, making a spectacle for the crowds. And Danny and I ended up in the water. We were unhurt, and everything went fine, but we did lose the race. There's the 2 trophies again. By the end of 1937, we pretty much dominated all of the racing at that time. And I will make a side note with Danny won't talk about, but his father, he was a crazy guy in the midgets. I mean, even I was amazed at some of the deals. So racing with him was a pure pleasure. He had no fear, and whatever I wanted to do, he was 100%. You know. And I really, when we flipped the boat at that deal, I thought back to Wally Snow, and I thought, oh God, is Danny ever going to get in the boat with me again? But no, had no problem. So anyway, dominating the whole 1937, we pretty much dominated everything, and the club was starting to get anxious to get some notoriety for the West Coast. Detroit had dominating the racing for years. The Gold Cup was the standard out there and had been racing since 1904. It's the longest trophy in raceboat history, the Gold Cup, and that's what we were going. Now,
Are we ready to go?
No,
We're not ready.
We're not ready to go yet. Okay,
Let's keep it going. We're losing some folks here.
Okay, but we started thinking about the Gold Cup. And if you remember, 1939 was going to be the World's Fair. There was talk about running a Gold Cup race at the World's Fair in 1929 or 1939, and it approached the club that they wanted to run a race, and we were so excited about doing that. But we felt that we needed a little bit more information to invite the boats from the East Coast out to the World's Fair. So, and this is the trophy, the Gold Cup, since 1904 that we wanted to go after, Danny and I. We had gone back east. I got on a plane in 37, went back to the Gold Cup that was being run at that time, and not only to go through the legal of the two different classes to make sure that we were acceptable to run a boat. When I was back there, that was my first experience with the Notre Dame, and fell in love with the people out there, and got to know them all. And even though I was 19 years old, almost 20, they were just the nicest to me, and especially Herb Mendelson that owned the Notre Dame. But I realized back there that my little boat was not going to be competitive. I was running close to the speed, but I needed more. And so when I came back, again, hit up my father and said, "Dad, I need a new boat." And so I sat and went to the drawing boards and started to draw a new boat. What I had seen back there was this boat called Juno, and it was the first three-point hydroplane that had been built. And how it came about was the fact that China had ordered from vendor boat companies, had ordered 12 boats that they could use as suicide boats. And the criteria was the boat had to go 60 miles an hour, and it had to carry a 500-pound bomb to go off. Ventnor came up with that, and how they did was that they also built water skis. They took 2 water skis and they put it on the inside of the boat, and they hit the parameters of it. They delivered to China 11 of the boats, but the 12th boat never was delivered for lack of payment, or the government had stopped it. But that boat sat for a couple of years in a warehouse and became Juno. And so when Juno went into the race there at the Gold Cup in 37, it caught Dan's eye, and I thought that was the answer to get my boat to go a little bit better. And so that's when we designed the boat with the sponsons on it, basically. I had to pay Ventnor. Ventnor's boat hulls, if I had bought, was $2,200 that I didn't have and wasn't going to go to my dad for it. So I contracted to build a hull with my designs, and you can see the 2 little sponsons that I put on it to give it a little bit more air. And that's the boat in front of our house there in Oakland on Harrison before I started putting it together. This is the boat in testing. Before we had painted it, it was just part there. That's Danny and I on the estuary testing out the boat. And the boat ran beautifully. We were here all the way here to go back to the Gold Cup the following year, and the city offered us $1,000, $500 for the entry fee and $500 for expensive. But when they realized that if I had won the race, that they'd have to host the Gold Cup, they backed out. The promise of $1,000 is broken, and we thought we were dead in the water. But again, who did I go to? Pops. Pops put up the money because we had too much invested in it, and so we were on our way to the Gold Cup. Go ahead, Danny.
All right. So the folks back in Detroit heard that there were some boat entry, and thanks to Pops with the $500 entry fee, we were going to go to the Gold Cup. And the people in Detroit were excited and telling about all the boats, Horace Dodge and Miss Canada and Theo Rossi from Italy, and their 2 boys there must be millionaires from Oakland that are going to be participating in the Gold Cup. 2 millionaires. But they didn't know, they put 2 and 2 together. So, Dan, how are we going to get the boat? We don't have a car to pull the trailer. I mean, how are we going to get to Detroit? We got to get there. Come on. Do you have an idea?
I had to sell my car to help pay for the boat as we were working on it and running it. So I had no car. I sold it to my younger brother. And he gave me some, from his paper route, he gave me some money to contribute. So I wasn't going to go to Grant's again for one of the winery's trucks. So I hit my mom up. So my mom had a 1935 Ford 5 window there. We bolted on a trailer hitch on the back of her bumper and took off.
And did we take off? We were hell-bent for Detroit, but first we had to get over the Sierra. As you know, it's a windy, twisty road, and there was a friend of ours running at Bonneville. So we took a little detour out to the Salt Flats to see the Bonneville run. And let's see, that was John Cobb set a speed record that year. And we were really excited to see that because we were 2 boys born for speed. So from that standpoint, we had to continue on our journey, just the 2 of us. You can imagine, we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't millionaires. We had a boat, single axle, wooden trailer behind the 35 Ford 3-window. And we were off to Detroit through Salt Lake City, across the plains, across the Mississippi River, and on.
Hold it again.
Yes.
Across the plains, we ran into 120-degree heat. So you can imagine towing a boat with 2 guys driving day and night, and the only stop that we did was to jump in whatever water we could find to cool off as we continued.
And man, did that feel good. But you can imagine what this car smelled like, and how this little the Ford went. I think I can. It's pulling a boat across the country, and here we go. So we tag team driving. I think I went a little faster than you, but you know who?
Naturally,
of course. So anyway, here we are. We did a stop, and you can see it with the Ford in some podunk town to maybe get some food or rest. And that's kind of what we looked like. You can imagine what we smelled like. But nevertheless, what I remember, I smelled pretty good. I don't know about you, Dan.
Yeah.
But, yeah, maybe about the same.
I was the one that had fear. He had no fear at all. Everything was going to be fine.
So as we got to Detroit, we didn't know where the hell we were going. I mean, someplace, Detroit Yacht Club, where is it? So there was a young paper boy in the morning there. And we said, hey, where's the Detroit Yacht Club? And he says, gosh, are you going to be in the Gold Cup? The boy said. And we said, yeah. He says, I tell you what, you follow me, I'll lead you to the Detroit Yacht Club. And that's over in Belle Isle. We had to cross the river, and the boy led us over right to the Detroit Yacht Club. So we pulled up right there in front of the door. We didn't know where to go, but hey, we're here. So we walked into the lobby, and we said, we're the boys from Oakland. And we got her, where do we go? And he says, oh, by the way, there was a press club meeting in regards to the Gold Cup, just happened to be that night. And so they pointed just down there, they'll tell you where to go and all that. So as we went into the auditorium, there's probably a group about like this. And we walked in and we said, we're the boys from Oakland. Well, of course, they stopped the meeting and were very interested in how we looked and how we smelled. And, the first thing they said, well, where's the boat? Did you ship it here or how did it get here? And we said, hell, it's right out front. Come on, can we see it? Of course you can. So if you all like to get up, no, just kidding. So they all came out, they looked at the boat, they looked at the boys from Oakland, and they said, oh my gosh, we called this wrong. The next day, there was a big retraction in the Detroit News. These are not two playboys from Oakland, and their boat looks more like a jalopy. I'm not making this up. This is all in print. We can document this story. So if you have any questions, we'll refer you to the print. So nevertheless, they did direct us to where the boats were being stored and gathered up. Now remember, this boat was probably in the value of $1,000 in the day, which was a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this particular creation. Now remember, we're up against Horace Dodge, Count Theo Rossi, Miss Canada, and many, many boats that are honestly 40 times more valuable than this boat. So the idea of the David and Goliath story is true. We got a boat worth $1,000 and up against race boats 40 times the value of this boat. But we were not daunted. We knew what we had. We were a team, and the boat was running good. And as you can see, I'm on the deck there, and Dan's alongside me, but my hands are crossed, and I'm saying, we got this. We can make this happen, regardless of the value of these other boats. And at the time, the Gold Cup boats were not known as the most worthy of their ability to stay together. They were going for speed, but they didn't have a great track record when it came to endurance. As you can see here, this was the race of, and the boats listed, excuse me, Miss Canada 3, Notre Dame with its W24 engine, Alagi, which was Count Theo Rossi's boat, shipped over by boat and from Italy. Excuse me, Dolphin 9, My Sin, and down and Wayne, and at the very bottom, Miss Golden Gate. So you can see we got top billing there as far as the facts of the race, but not to be daunted. Right.
Let me go back just a little bit to clarify after the Detroit Yacht Club. The papers did light up all over the state and actually all over the country because there's newspaper from people all over the world because of Count Rossi, which was the Martini and Rossi family from Italy, and his boat was worth about $1 million at that time. So anyway, the newspapers went crazy about these two young little kids with their jalopy and home-built boat that went all over the newspapers. And Danny Foster was the more talkative person and used to tell the competitive and how we grew up as kids riding motorcycles and tricycles against each other in our competitive way. But Dan alluded to the number of boats that would break up because most of the boats had gone up. You can see up at the top, There was 3 heats of 30 miles each, so that meant that these boats had to run 90 miles in one day over a period of time, and each of the courses were about 3.5 miles. Before the race even got started, now at the time it was pretty rough out there. We were going to run on Saturday a preliminary race, Danny and I, to just check out the boat and some of the competitions, but the water was very, very rough at the time, and so Dan had decided that he wasn't going to take a chance of running the boat and not being ready to go to the Gold Cup, because after all, that was the reason that he built a new boat to come out of there, and he was hoping to go against the Notre Dame. That was the one boat that inspired him to come all the way back to Detroit. Well, they didn't run on Saturday, but Sunday, a couple of the boats went in the water, and the Notre Dame went in the water for testing, and it ended up flipping and sinking the boat. Brand new boat that had just been finished. It had not competed in a race yet, and immediately by Saturday that boat was out of the race, which Dan was a little bit disappointed because he had become quite close with Mendelssohn. Miss Canada was running okay, but Excuse Me went out in the first heat. My Sin had water in the oil, and it didn't run. Warren didn't even go in the water. So by race day on Monday, Memorial Day, for the championship Gold Cup race, there was only 4 boats that made the cut for the starting line. And you can see here at the bottom, home-built boat, Jalopy second. That was a lead man, but that's the way they referred to us, as a Jalopy. Okay, go ahead.
Well, as you can, go ahead.
1 second, I have this in my hand. I had told you about the newspaper articles, but one of the newspapers.
Mic up to your mouth.
One of the newspapers, the day before Saturday, that came out on Saturday, was a long article on the boats. And at the very end of the article, I'll quote, "Whether they win or not, these 2 courageous youths have added a new note to Gold Cup racing, where they are putting their courage and skill against the wealth of their rivals. They'll bear watching." And that's what got the crowd going. Everybody was interested in what these 2 kids were going to do.
And they were right on, because we were determined to be having not come across the country, but to actually have a shot at the Gold Cup. So in order to represent what actually happened, by the way, on the shores of the Detroit River, there were not 1,000 people, 10,000 people. No, there was 200,000 people. This is a big deal. And I'm going to maybe ask some of you to act as the crowd as we go across it and demonstrate the last heat of this race.
Let's just tell them about the first heat.
Okay, let's bring you up to date. Go ahead.
You are so excited to climb up on top of this boat.
I'm ready. I'm ready, but we have to get ready. But go ahead, Dave.
The first heat of the 30-mile race, we had four boats. In all 3 of the heats, we were the first boat over the starting line. Dan was so anxious, and the boat was running beautifully. Even the newspaper remarked on how smooth and effortlessly the boat went across the water. And so in the first heat, we led for a while, but Alaji eventually passed us, a more powerful boat. But we were holding our own in second for a while, and then eventually Canada. But Excuse Me, which was Horace Dodge boats, ended up not making it. He blew out, and so by the end of the race, there was just 3 of us, and But I think, I can't remember whether we passed Miss Canada, because it was running pretty roughly. So I think we came in second in the first heat. You can see Alaji passing us. And in among my archives, we have a number of pictures that was signed by Count Rossi at the period of time when, at the end of the race, that came very close by the end of the race and put on quite a show.
Yeah, but as you can see, it was close. But we gave them a run for the money. The really noticeable thing was we could out-turn them in the turns. So we would get a leg up on a turn because we were back to that skid fin and so on, being able to turn sharper than him. But that guy had some top speed that would catch us down the straightaway.
And the boat ran very rough. When you see the two boats side by side, we were just cruising along smooth, getting speeds of 80 miles an hour. He would hobby horse and had a lot of power, but we were having a Cadillac type of ride.
Which was nice. It was an enjoyable ride today. Yes.
And as we came closer and closer, you could see the crowds really wishing for us. One of the reasons was we were the only American boat that was in contention. Nobody wanted Italy to win this race. So there was two reasons. The young little kids from the boondocks against the wealth of the Rossi family. So we had everybody in our pocket.
We were the underdogs, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to go back here. Okay, we finished the second race. There was just the three of us. Again, we were in second behind the Count Rossi, and Miss Canada was behind us. And so the third heat, the final, was going, and it was just the three boats.
So we have to get into our race gear today to demonstrate you and give you a visual of how this might have looked. So, just a moment, please. Put on your gear.
This is not.
This is the uncle.
Can't say they didn't
Oh, handsome.
Yeah, just let Okay, as you can see, we're in the third heat of this Gold Cup. It's all on the line. There's only three boats, and we stand a good chance of winning. So, Dan, let's get in the boat as though we are getting in the boat. So, by the way, Dan did supply this cowling for us, so thank you, Dan. And it happened to be the same color of the Miss Golden Gate.
This is a 7-liter.
In the microphone, Dan, please.
Oh, this cowling is off of my 7-liter at the house, which is one of Dan's boats, and the same yellow color as Miss Golden Gate.
So from that standpoint, we are here at the Gold Cup, and we are ready for the third heat. Now there's multiple laps going on, and I'd like to say we're pretty damn excited. We've come across the country. We're here to participate in this Gold Cup, and we're going to make it. Anything's going here. So Dan, let's hit the start. Are we ready?
We are ready.
We are ready. I'll keep track of the laps. Okay.
Okay,
you just drive the boat.
I just drive the boat.
Okay. Let's go.
Okay.
Put your foot in. Come on. Let's go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Go.
Go.
The start has
We're
go.
going.
We're in the boat.
We're in the boat. We're going.
God, damn, it's pretty rough out there. You know, 60, 70 miles, 80 miles an hour. We're going.
We're going.
Hey,
We're
look,
going good.
look at there's a Logie right there. We're holding our own. Look happened.
We crossed the start line first. We're on there.
Yeah. We're in the first. Look at
We're first.
go.
The crowd is going crazy.
Down the first turn. Oh, this one. Yeah, we're going around this one. Okay, here we go. Oh God, this thing is turning. Look, we just passed the watching. Look, he's in our way. Okay, let's go. Okay. Now we're going. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, motor sounds okay.
Danny!
What?
Oh, she's
There it goes again. Oh shit! Oh my God, what are we gonna do? We can't get our paddle.
Back in second place again.
Let's go. We're second place, but
We're ahead of Miss Canada's.
Miss Canada's way back there. She can't go out of the water, so we're going. But Miss Canada's still going. Yeah. What? Well, wait a minute. What happened? Look, we're slowing down, Dan. What's happening?
In the fourth heat, this is the fourth of the 12 lap heat, all of a sudden, Dan, I have no gas. I have no gas. What's going on? The engines
Look at.
stop.
I'm looking, and the crowd went.
Oh!
And the crowd just started to cry. But, and there goes Miss Canada, 3. Oh my God, wait, listen, let me check on something, Dan, hang on. Oh, wait, I think I got it. Yeah. It's the throttle cable. It came off.
Can you handle the gas?
I think I can. Okay.
Okay, let's go.
I tell you tell me go fast or go slow. Okay, here we go.
All right, let's go.
Hang on. Here we go.
Okay,
Okay.
overboard. I need you.
Okay, here we go. Oh, go. And the crowd went. And we're going. We're going. Let's go in that turn again. Whoa! I'll slow up just a little bit. Okay, here we go. And
Faster, Danny, faster.
Look at, we just passed Miss Canada.
Yeah, we're back in second.
Not a lot, he's still ahead of us. So damn it. But we're going to give it a go. This is 8 more laps.
8 more
Hang in
laps,
there.
so we have to go around. Now, as a side note, Logie realizes that something's going around. The crowd's going crazy, and he's starting to figure out what's going on. And I have a feeling he slowed up a little bit. He did not want to just walk away from that.
We wanted to make it a race.
He was determined to make it a race, and we did. I mean, the crowd went crazy. We were going right up there. Miss Canada stayed in there for a while, but again, it broke down towards the end of the race, and it was out. So it was a 2-man race, and we were determined to make it to the finish line.
And we came in second. Yay! And I didn't fall off the boat because Dan hung on to me.
I wouldn't let this guy go for love or money. I did not want to have to face his family when I got back. I had a bad habit of losing my co-pilots in my racing career, so...
Yeah, she came through, baby. She came through, but I'm glad I could reach that throttle because otherwise we would have been dead in the water and left everybody disappointed. So.
And again, the crowds were unbelievable. Everybody came out. I mean, we had all the dignitaries coming up and congratulating us. And the one thing that I didn't tell you is that when we, how much more time we have here, but...
We're doing good. We haven't lost anybody yet. Thank you for
So, coming in there, I hadn't told you that when we first showed up at the race and everybody was talking about my mother's car and that it was an old jalopy and stuff like that, Ford had come in and taken the car away from us. They gave us the car to use.
But honestly, Dan, I didn't care that they took the car because we had people wanting to shovel us everything.
Yeah,
we were heroes.
We were going out to dinner. Everybody wanted to get a little piece of us in those early moments of the race. And Danny was very boastful. He was in this. Oh, we have this. Don't you worry. We're going to win this. We want to take it back to California, and nobody was going to talk him out of that.
Right.
So anyway. Standard Oil ended up offering us a gas credit card to get home. And they also wanted the change of, because they all knew that we slept in the car coming out, that they gave us vouchers for any of the hotels along the way back home. So we were really given the keys to the city.
We were given the keys to the city. I wish I still had it, but nevertheless, we were given the keys to the city.
And in that final heat, we had planned to go to the President's Cup the following weekend. We thought as long as we were there, then we'd give it a good show, and the boat was running beautiful. We fixed the throttle right away. But in pulling it out, we found out that we had a foot crack in one of the sponsons on the bottom of the boat. So we decided to pull up our wares and take our winnings. As a present from, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself.
I don't know, where's your clicker?
Where's my clicker?
There it is, someplace.
I'm sorry, Gary.
There it is. Here we go.
There's a lodging at the end, and a couple of the papers the next morning were just over the top of one of the most exciting Gold Cup races in history of these two dynamic boats towards the end. Count Rossi, right here, offered us the Martini and Rossi Perpetual Trophy for outstanding showmanship for the end of the race. And he also gave us, as a present, 2 little motor scooters or something like that.
I like to think they were gigantic Indian motorcycles, but nevertheless.
But anyway, his generosity and his thrill of the show was powerful. The sad thing about that, since he had won, he was supposed to host the race the following year, the winter. Well, nobody was always going to go over to Italy, and he said, no, we'll run it next year. I'll defend my championship at the Detroit Yacht Club. But as the time was going on, 1939, what was going on? The war. The U.S. government would not give him a visa to come back into this country. And so he never was able to race over here again. But he continued in his homeland and so forth. But just a nice guy. There was a little bit of correspondence between Dan and him when he was refused not to come back and race. But here it is again, presenting the trophy to us.
And we're trying to find out where that trophy is today. I reached out to the Martini and Rossi in Italy, but unfortunately didn't get any response. But I don't know. That trophy must exist. We're kind of curious that the boys' names are on it. But if you have any great ideas of how to reach them, I would be open to it. But that trophy's got to be someplace.
Yeah, there was a perpetual trophy that was going on for the races over in Italy that they had done, much like we had with the Doc Barron Trophy here. Earlier on, Dan was talking about our 1930 race boat, Danny's boat that I'm always in. You can see that the showman recreated the race.
Well, this is the real test, yeah. Dan was behind the wheel and I was up manually doing the throttle. This is my boat, the Maybe Not 2, a 1930 gentleman racer, Lake Tahoe champion. And this was the boat that the Fleischacker family had commissioned back in the day. It came out of Lake Tahoe. It now sponsors a Hemi 392 V drive with an external brass rudder. That's a canvas deck. And those top sides, those black top sides, are no butt seams on them. So it's all riveted construction. Very nice craft, easy to drive, and honestly, I never did have to stand up and work the throttles. This was just for demonstration purposes.
No, he enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
So, anyway, to wrap up this, because we are
we're going a little
overtime here, but I'll give you a little head. We head back to Detroit, back to Oakland, California, feeling pretty darn good of ourselves. And quite frankly, our heads were pretty big. We arrived back into Oakland, and again, it was like a ticker tape parade. The newspapers, because that shot of Danny up on the deck went worldwide. It went all over Europe about the race of these two little teenage boys who are 20 years old running the race. And so by the time we got home, Oakland was full of articles and papers about the race. And but I'm going to give you a side note of that I should have mentioned earlier. When I went to my father to get money, not only for the first Golden Gate, but the second Golden Gate, there was a little deal made with my dad. And he said, okay, we'll get you back to the top race in the country and we will give you your shot. But when you come home, your racing days are over. Wow. If you go back when he was the world champion speed racer in his teenage years, his father came to him at 20 years old after he competed in the world speed roller skating championship, came to him and said, your days are over, you're in the winery, and you're ready to take on your due. So the same thing was done to Dan, and that was a deal that Dan made. You know, this was the epitome, and Grandpa ruled the roost in the family. But about a month and a half later, Danny gets a call from Herb Mendelson. Herb Mendelson congratulated him and stuff like that. And like I said, they've become pretty close. He was like a mentor when we were running since his boat had sunk. Called Dan up and said, Dan, I'd like you to come back and take a look at the Notre Dame. We've got it up. The driver called Barry is in the hospital and he won't be driving for a long, long time. He says, will you come back and take a look at the boat and what the problems of the boat was? Offered Dan more money than he'd ever seen before. He would fly him back, put him up in an apartment, and take care of him. So you can imagine after the phone call, Dan going to his father saying, I'm going back east to look at the Notre Dame. It was not a pretty sight in the family. You know, promises were made, but in the Italian family, you make a promise, boy, you better be able to back it up. So anyway, the long and the short of it, Dan went back and started to redesign. You can see he was in this article when he got back there, he was redesigning the rudder and the system. And for those who had seen the Notre Dame talk, that's where the story started. But back to the family. Okay, Dan leaves. Who's next? My dad. All of a sudden, Grandpa goes to my father and says, Tag, you're it. And Dan, all of a sudden, my dad is all of a sudden, tagged to take Danny's place in the winery.
And that was his dad, and his dad is Gene.
My
Gene
father was
Arena.
Gene Arena.
Got tagged.
But the war comes along, Dad ends up going to become a pilot and so forth like that. And so for 6 years,
Mike up.
6 years takes place, and when the boys come back from the war, and they're already talking during the war about these Allison airplane engines and these what the new boats are starting to look like, the two boys got together and said, we're going to build a boat and go back to the Gold Cup again. Which they did. That's another story.
Dan, that could be part 2 of this saga. Yeah. We want to leave you with the idea that the boys from Oakland were nothing but heroes to them and the area here in Oakland, and put Oakland on the map, I feel. But there's one thing that you left out, Dan. When we got back from Detroit with Mom's car, and by the way, remember Ford took it for a couple, 4 days? Anyway, what did Mom say? I forget.
Where did you get this car? What happened to my car?
It didn't have a dent on it.
Yeah. My mother, her grandmother, accused me of totaling her car and having to borrow money to get a new car for it. Ford had gone completely through the car, repainted it, rebuilt the engine, and it was like a brand new car when we came back home. And it took a long time for us to convince Mom that was her car.
That's when car companies had heart, shall we say.
Well, and they also used it as advertising.
Yeah.
Their car pulls a race boat all the way across the desert in the United States. I mean, they made hay with it in the newspaper.
Listen, we'd like to thank you for your attention.
We talked about Danny, my father Dan coming back and ending up going back east. But Danny Foster continues on. He goes right back to racing his midgets, and for the next 2 years before the war, becomes one of the top midget drivers in the country. And here you see an article of Danny right here, the top 5 drivers in the West Coast, I guess, and stuff like that. And he ended up getting an award for.
All I know is the wild man behind the wheel, which sometimes just related to his boating career. Up here we have some history of Danny, and some of his accomplishments. But we're going to leave that for another program. If you like what you saw today, tell your congressman, and we could come back. What do you think, Dan?
Yes. Like I said, there was all sorts of newspaper articles and so on. One of the last articles that we had in the family was somebody that wrote after the race. The 2 Dans who won the hearts of the spectators with their skill and sportsmanship received the Martini and Rossi Trophy from Theodore Rossi for their second place effort. The California kids bought a patched up jalopy called the Miss Golden Gate and won second place, but they stole the show. Hey!